In 2023, Be Quiet has been on a freaking rampage. Dark-Base Pro 901, Pure Loop 2, and the best air cooler we have seen until this very day. But actually there was a product in between all of these releases that deserves some light to be directed at it. This is the Be Quiet Shadow Base 800, the case that makes explaining Be Quiet product lines 1,000 times more complicated. Looking at the whole lineup, this is the very first time Be Quiet has released a shadow-based case. There are shadow line coolers and fans, but no cases yet. And to give you some insight on Be Quiet's naming scheme, a shadow base case is supposed to be above a pure base and below a silent base. Makes sense so far. What doesn't really make any sense are the numbers behind the model. The first shadow base is called 800, then there is a 601 silent base followed by a silent base 802, just to finish off my last standing brain cell with a dark base 700. There isn't any consistency in these numbers whatsoever. But who needs consistency if a case is awesome? And not to spoil the rest of the video, but this is an awesome case. In total, there are 3 different versions of the Shadow Base 800. The regular one, the DX and FX, with the last 2 having additional white sub-versions. Case-wise, all of them are identical, with the sole difference being the amount of RGB infusion. The regular has 0, the DX has 2 strips going down in the front of the case, and the FX has 4 additional 140mm light wings instead of 3 pure wings. But case-wise, it's pretty much the same thing. The one that we got here is the 800 DX model, so another usage of Be Quiet's Pure Wing 3s, which still need to be released as independent products. Out of the box, the Shadow Base 800 DX comes in what we would expect, a regular carton box filled with additional protective layers, sheets and even additional pieces of carton in case somebody thinks about hitting the tempered glass side panel with a forklift. Something that has already happened to us. Once the case is opened by removing both side panels using the standard screw and pull method, we will be greeted with a load of goodies and the type of manual Be Quiet now ships with every case, nicely explaining stuff using illustrations and without huge chunks of text. Very good. Now let's cover the general stuff about the case. Standing on the table, the case measures 550mm in length, 247mm in width and 422 in height. So generally speaking, it is still a mid-tower, but a big mid-tower. However, don't let the form factor fool you, because we got a ton of space inside of it. By default, we can install pretty much all standard motherboard sizes in here. Mini ITX, Micro ITX, ATX, all of them are not a problem. But there's more, because we can even fit eATX ports in here, and that without having to move that cable hiding bracket or blocking off these cable holes going to the back, which is very impressive. Which is not to say that you can't move it, because if you really want to, you are perfectly capable of moving that bracket towards the front of the case by moving some of the screws in the back, by unclipping it, so that's definitely an option. For the CPU cooler and GPU length, we have the same type of treat, up to 180mm high coolers, and for the GPU, Be Quiet officially states 430mm long cards are compatible, but after checking that, it's actually more like 460mm until you start hitting the front panel. But on that note, it doesn't really matter. Every card will fit in here, and that in every dimension, because the cards can be up to 17.5cm deep, so even 4090s, including the octopus plug, will fit easily. Cooling wise, the treat just continues. The DX version of this case comes pre-filled with 3 1200 RPM Pure Wings 3 in 140mm. One in the lower front, one in the top and one in the back. And on that note, if you're planning to use the case as a get and go thing without additional cost spent on fans, move the top fan to the front. The result will just be better. As a whole, this case is a hoarder for fans. The front can support up to 3 120 or 140mm fans, the top does the same thing with up to 3 whatever sized fans, and the back has both 120 or 140mm fan support with enough cutouts to allow the 140 fan to actually do its job. For radiators, this is the type of stuff that I like. The top and front support up to 420 or 360 mil rads, which isn't the case that often in mid-towers at all. This is not to say that you should be trying dual 420, 60 mil thick rads. At some point they will start hitting each other. But for thinner 25mm ones with the front ends installed inside the front panel, you can actually get away with using dual 420 rads in here. To finish off the fans, there is another 120 or 140mm spot in the bottom of the case. Hidden behind this enormous fabric dust filter removable from the front, we will find this case-wise spanning triangular mesh structure. Amazing work there, but hidden inside of that we will actually find that single fan spot supposed to push air upwards into the case. Now from the top we will find the same air spreader that we already saw on the Dark Base 901. I won't comment too much on that. We had a video where I tried all kinds of stuff to somehow make that thing measurable or generate any type of measurable difference. I couldn't. Now my premise might have been slightly off. I was under the impression that the bottom fan grill is supposed to do something, but as I was told after the video, the fan and that grill were just there for ideal heat dissipation of the PSU and proper airflow inside the entire case. So sure, if you are under the impression that there is some type of heat buildup in the bottom of the case behind the PSU, go ahead, get a fan in there, but as long as you don't install like hard drives in there and blast them with that fan, nothing will even notice that the fan is there. But it's not the fan spots that are quite on point inside the shadow base. The surrounding is where they got me. The front of the case is covered by a high density mesh with some additional mesh on both sides because more mesh equals better mesh. That thing is just filled. If you remove the front panel, you will be quite delighted too, because the two RGB strips are powered using a push-pin approach. Great to see that this type of stuff is also present in Be Quiet's lower line cases. And in front of the fans you will find another very thin fabric dust filter to make sure that not even the smallest particles make it inside of your build. That being said, it seems like Be Quiet thought the secondary mesh would, or the whole structure, would act like a little door while it falls out. Not by default, it will stay in there nicely and it will stay in place as long as it's installed, but don't think you can swivel it like a door to open. It's just covered, it will fall out immediately. It's like hooks and a magnet, it's all. But back to the well thought through things. The top of the case is covered with another very high quality feeling magnetic dust filter with hard borders, including some of that Be Quiet branding. Below we got the same type of triangular mesh type of panel with basically zero air restrictions. And what I love about this one is that the fans are pushed as far away from the motherboard as possible. This not only makes it way easier to handle fans and radiators, but at the same time the additional mesh after the 140 based rails is allowing bigger, like theoretical 160mm fans to be utilized, like the Silverstone Shockforce series. The same applies to the front. You got quite some space for really thick radiator action, but in case you like your rads even thicker with push-pull fan action, you can actually snap out that fan air distribution thingy and let your fetish flow freely. Just keep in mind that everything you mount to the front will be taken off that 460mm GPU length, but good luck trying to find any GPU or any radiator thickness that will create like a crossing there. Overall, the potential fan situation inside the Shadow Base 800 is amazing. You can fit up to 8 140mm fans. One might not be as particularly useful, but still, fans everywhere you look. The included free fans are actually quite good too. We haven't tested them as independent fans because they aren't released yet, but for the build we did, they did a great job. The system was quiet as hell, as cool as the Dog Rock Pro 5 allowed the 13700K to be. Neither the case nor the fans created any sort of measurable restrictions as far as we could tell. So very good right there. I will say, by default, there's a single fan in the front and one in the top and then the other one in the back. And I would really advise you to move the top one to the front. That would leave you with 2 intake and 1 exhaust, which generally speaking is the better approach. Also in this case. Another thing I really love about this is how Be Quiet did the drives. By default, you got 4 individual drive spots in this case, 2 of which are on the side bracket, which can be removed by unscrewing it in the back, and another 2 are on a similarly looking bracket behind the motherboard, which does have multiple positions. Each of these 2 brackets can house up to 2 SSDs, making it a total of 4. The bracket which protrudes to the front of the case also has a little clip-in piece in the center, allowing you to hide the cables because the SSDs will be visible from the front of the case. But the really cool thing is that this bracket right here can actually also take 3.5-inch drives by default. So we are looking at a total of 4 spots, 2 of which can be 3.5-inch spinners. And keep in mind that if you can mount a 3.5-inch drive in the back, you can imagine how much space you have for cable management. And that's not even the reason why I'm so happy with how they have done things. Because in the box of accessories, Be Quiet includes this bracket. This one can be added to the bottom of the case on one of 3 different positions above the spot where that fan will go. And the cool thing here is that this is fully optional and not installed by default. So by default, your PSU can be as long as the case is, which that PSU doesn't exist, and in case that you would like to add 2 additional hard drive cages, giving you either 2 3.5-inch or 4 2.5-inch drives, you can do so. And this will then start limiting your PSU length to something like 250 or 280 depending on the exact spot you've chosen. Now these additional cages are not included with the case, so if you really want to go through with this, you have to get them separately. Not quite the good news, but considering this is one of Be Quiet's budget lineups, it's understandable. But no matter if you want to have more drives or not, I would still recommend you to install that bracket, even if it's going to be empty. Its position not only adds some strength to the whole case, but at the same time it acts like a great cable squeezer in case that you got a cable army located behind your PSU. It's kind of a random little fact, but if you got like an army of cables, including extensions and maybe even multiple ones, and you have something keeping everything inside that compartment, it will make mounting the backside so much freaking easier. Speaking of panels, the left side of the case is covered by the usual Be Quiet grade of high quality tempered glass, including catching screws. With that, we still got one thing about the case that I wanted to cover, the vertical GPU mount. Similarly to how they have done things in the dark base, the shadow base 800 allows you to remove the whole PCIe bracket panel and rotate it by 90 degrees to allow vertical GPU orientations. Keep in mind that you still need to bring your own riser, but it's a good option to have. And before we finish the features, I/O. In the front top of the case, we will find what I would call 2023 grade I/O. A USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C and 2 USB 3.2 Type-A's accompanied by the usual clicky start button and separate audio in and out. Additionally, we also got an ARGB button that controls the 2 strips in the front. It's SATA powered and can be passed through to your motherboard if that is what you really want to do. With the whole case covered, let's talk about my personal experience building inside of the new Shadow Base 800. It was amazing. It doesn't quite look like it, but the inside of this thing is enormous. You have so much space to work with, the cable holes all around the case are perfectly placed, and the cable covers makes hiding your mess so easy. The front part of the PSU compartment has so much room to work with that you can just stuff your cables in there. Like I wasn't even thinking, just stuffing. And because the whole thing is covered in the top, you don't even see your mess. One thing that I thought would bother me, but actually didn't, is the lack of any GPU power hole at the front of the PSU shroud. Because the holes in the back of it are so wide and so deep, I didn't face any issue to just route it through here. That worked perfectly fine, no issue whatsoever. And because the PSU is pushed so much towards the front of the case, or the right side now, or in other words, because you have so like a gap like this behind the PSU, you can just move it out there perfectly fine. Design-wise, it's a very sleek looking case. In all black, it's, yeah, obviously all black, but what we got here is the white version, which has two side air intakes in black, the top air filter in black, and the I/O panel in black. So for the white version, it is still very clean and kept simple, but because of the white and black mixture, you are kinda already set up for a white and black look. For me, I really like the design choices Be Quiet did here, but it's design and that will always be on your end to decide. But what I can say is about quality. And in that regard, this is really on Be Quiet standard. It is sturdy as hell, got some strong feet, enough distance in the bottom, and no matter where I wiggle or push, nothing flexes too much. So very, very well, or very, very well built overall. There is one thing that I really believe Be Quiet could have done, which is the side mountings for the SSDs could have been multiple purpose, because if you remove that thing, you are left with a giant hole, and that thing would have been so perfect to mount fans to it. It's so unsatisfying in the end. They could have done it, add some screw holes, make the hole appropriately sized, and drill a bit of mesh through the back panel, and boom, additional side intake or exhaust. That would have been so great. It would have made the case, it would have elevated the case to another level cooling wise. But you can't have everything. Looking at Be Quiet's complete and updated lineup, the Shadow Base is supposed to fill the gap between the pure Base 500FX and the Silent Base 802, before the new Dark Base finishes off the line with the most insane thing they have ever released. But to be honest, I don't really see the Shadow Base as being that much inferior to the Silent Base. Yeah, the Silent Base got some extra features like the top rate that you can slide out, or they have the additional silent or air panels, or modes, how they called it, that you can redo. The side panel wasn't mounted using screws, but it was like a clicking thing where the whole thing came off. So there were some features, but the Shadow Base is definitely the newer model, including the stuff Be Quiet learned in recent years. And that doesn't mean that they made so many cuts overall. Like the back panel of the case still features that sound dampening material. There are still like premium features in here. So yeah, in some sort, the Shadow Base for me is supposed to be an in-between pure and silent base, but I couldn't tell you if I prefer the Shadow Base to the Silent Base. In some regards, or in experience, like the building experience, I would even put them side by side in some sort. On the price front, I can get the FX version right now for about 150 euros, which is a bit hefty, but considering the included fans and how they perform, and that it's a 30 euro price up from the pure base, the price is kind of explainable. So where do we stand? I freaking love it. Quality-wise, it's perfect. Compatibility-wise, it's very excellent for 2023 standards. A do-whatever-you-want case. And experience-wise, there aren't many cases I had such a great time building it. So as far as we are concerned, absolute recommendation. If you're looking for an all-rounder case that can just get the job done no matter what, this is a great consideration. But okay, for today, this is going to be it for Be Quiet and their Shadow Base 800DX in white. At this point, a huge thank you to them for sending it over. On a side note, we also have a Discord server, so if you want to join, the link is down below. And of course, we still have channel membership, so if you're looking for a good way to sell your soul for an RG poop emoji, that's a pretty good way to go. Additionally, you can rest assured that the income will not only keep the channel afloat, but will also serve to get some antidepressants, because according to Be Quiet, size does matter. And I've been told otherwise. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you want to continue, have a look at our take on the new Be Quiet Darkrook Elite, the best air cooler we have tested so far. Hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.